Thank you for joining us tonight for our very first Real Talk with Dr. Irie. Thank you, India, for being here.
Oh, you was talking to me.
No, first I was talking to the community, and then I was talking to you.
Okay.
So, thank you, community, for joining India and I for our very first Real Talk. Now, this isn't the first time that we have gone live together, but this is the first time we've gone live under the heading of Dream Big for one of our Real Talk segments. So, thank you so much for joining me, joining us, and Indy, thank you for saying yes.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I need to close the blinds.
You need to close the blinds?
Look.
Okay, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and close the blinds. Okay, is that better? Okay.
I think so.
All right.
Yes, that looks fine.
That looks better?
See?
Okay.
Does
Okay.
that look better?
Yeah, I guess it does. All right, everybody, thank you. So tonight, my daughter India and I are going to have a conversation with each other, and we're going to talk to you. We are actually live streaming on YouTube and my YouTube channel and Facebook. And so, hi, Alex, how are you? I'm so glad y'all are here tonight joining us. And so, if you have any questions, or comments that you'd like to make, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will be able to see them whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Facebook. And so I thought I would just begin because the title of this conversation is mother daughter love. We always say mother daughter love. I always say that, mother daughter love. I do the hashtag mother daughter love. But we're talking about cultivating a shame-free relationship and home. Cultivating a shame-free relationship and home. And to begin with, I'd just like to give just a really short definition of shame. And it's one that Brene Brown uses. Some of you, I'm sure most everybody knows who Brene Brown is. She's a clinical social worker and author, and she really writes a lot about vulnerability and shame. And one of the things that she says about shame is that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. When I talk about shame, one of the things that I always say is that shame makes you feel that you are uh, intrinsically bad, right? Like the way you were born, just your very essence is bad, right? Not that you have done a bad thing or some bad things, but that your personhood, your very identity, your very essence is bad, right? And so, want to talk about that. Want to talk about, shame as relates to mother-daughter relationships, and how and just really our experiences. One of the things that I want to say is that I am not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist, I'm a pastor. Um, my background is social work, but I'm not, and neither India or I are here to tell anybody what they ought to do, how they ought to parent, how they ought to live.
We're not here to clinically diagnose anybody because we do not have the license to do that.
Exactly. But what we do know about is our relationship. That's what we are expert on. We're expert
on us.
On us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's worked for us.
Exactly. What has worked for us. And that's what we want to share with you. But before I do that, I want to, Indy, I want to talk a little bit about my upbringing, my childhood, right? Because we're having this conversation, I don't want people to go away thinking, oh, I lived a charmed life and I had just, an incredible relationship with my mother. And, I need people to know, and I want people to know that just because your childhood or your relationship with your mother was not what you may have wanted it to be or what it could have been or needed to be, does not mean that you can't parent your own children well, right? It does not mean, even if you grew up in a shame-based environment, it does not mean that you cannot change that circumstances for the next generation. Doesn't mean that you can't change it for your own child. And so I did grow up with a lot of shame. My background as a child, I experienced sexual abuse on more than one occasion by more than one person, and that in and of itself can cause someone to feel a sense of, hi Phil, hi Emmy Lou, thank you all for joining us. Uh, Childhood sexual abuse, just that can cause a child to feel intrinsically unworthy, can cause a child to feel flawed, right? Can cause a child to feel not good enough. And in fact, that is how I felt, India, growing up. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like everybody else, every other kid in the school, in my class, was prettier, smarter, better than me. And so I have childhood sexual abuse in my background. Also in my background, my mother, and I didn't realize this, I didn't know this until later on, way into my adulthood. But my mother she was raped. My mother was raped.
Trigger warning.
Yeah,
by the way,
yeah.
guys.
Oh, thank you, Andy.
Trigger warning.
Lots of trigger warnings.
I'm so sorry that we didn't say that before.
Yeah.
But to anyone who may be sensitive to the topic of abuse or sexual assault, this is a trigger warning for you. So,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Mom.
No, that's okay, baby. And one of the things I'm going to do after this goes live, I'm going to go and put that on the heading. Good trigger idea. Warning.
Good.
Yeah. And so my mom was raped, and there's a lot more to that I don't feel comfortable sharing. That happened to her as a result of being raped, but so she carried around with her a lot of anger, and that anger was distributed on me. And so not only did I experience sexual abuse, but I experienced physical abuse. I'm talking, and I know, a lot of us in the Black community, we grew up getting beat. We call them beatings, right? Not spankings. We got beatings. Well, I got beatings. Yeah, and so I got beatings. I mean, it was so bad that I would get webs like on my body, and I would go to school, and people would see the webs on my body, but CPS was not the big thing that it is now. So nobody ever called CPS on my mom. So there was physical abuse. Also, in my home, my mother married my stepfather, who was a heroin addict. So I grew up in a home where there was drug addiction. And I remember on one occasion I went into the bathroom, and my stepfather used to go in the bathroom, and he'd be in there for hours. And then when he would come out, it would smell a certain kind of way. But what it was, he had these because he was an IV drug user, and where he would inject himself would get infected, and he wouldn't get treatment for it. So when you have these sores, it develops an odor. And so I would go in the bathroom, I'd smell that odor. And I remember one time, Indy, I may have told you this, I found this was back in the day when they had the Coke bottles, had those tin caps, and he would take the tin caps, and I don't know how I knew this at like 10 years old, but I knew that he was in the bathroom heating up his heroin in the tin, and and injecting himself, and he hid it underneath the toilet, but I found it. And so I grew up in a home with my stepfather was a heroin addict, and he would often steal my brothers and my toys, or I remember like a bike or a radio, and he would sell it, he would pawn it, and use it for drugs. So all that was my background, and I was an empath and an introvert. Yes, I am an empath and an introvert, and so I feel things and felt things very, very deeply, right? Um, and so that's just a little bit about my background. Now, uh, my mother was a strong woman. She was a strong woman in a lot of areas. And then, like most of us, we have our weaknesses, we have our areas of strength, and we have our areas of vulnerability. Um, and my mother was very creative and very artistic. And my mother was brilliant. I think she was. She was brilliant. Very talented. She just did not. She was not. She wasn't nurtured. Her gifts and talents were not nurtured in such a way that they could be maximized. And I think that when our children, when we do not help them to maximize and to discover, who they are and what they're good at, and direct them, along those lines, which is what I think the scripture means when it says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they won't depart from it. That text is not talking about like raise them in the church. No, it's talking about pay attention to your child, figure out who they are, and help them to grow in that direction, right? Find out their strengths and their weaknesses, and what excites them about life, and where their passions are, and groom them and grow them in those directions. And so when that does not happen, there's something I think that gets harmed within a child, right? And I think that's what happened to my mom. That she had so much potential and so many, I think, unrealized dreams, and because she was also a Taurus, so
very stubborn and hard-headed.
So there was a mean streak.
Oh yeah.
There was a mean streak. Yes. Me too, Dr. Ira, an empath and an introvert. Yes. Hey, Cassidy, how are you? I got beatings too at the hands of my father. Recently, I watched What Happened to You, Nina Simone's daughter. Yes, Lisa spoke about how she was beat too. I'm so sorry that happened to you too, Dr. Irie. Thank you. It happened to so many people, right? Um, and so I I never wanted to have a daughter.
But not for the reasons y'all think.
That's right. I never wanted to have a daughter. I was afraid to have a daughter because I was afraid she would be molested like me, right? I was afraid that she would be vulnerable in all the ways that girls are vulnerable. Not that boys aren't too, because boys get molested, but I was a girl and I didn't know about that, right? All I knew is what happened to me, and I just could not imagine it happening to my daughter. And so I didn't want a daughter. And of course,
that's exactly what you got.
That's exactly what I got, right? And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about when I found out I was pregnant. Indy's dad and I were married at the time, and I found out I was pregnant, and found out it was a girl. And when and this is what I think, this is what helped me in my parenting. When I was 7 months pregnant, I got a job. I got hired with Child Protective Services as an investigator. So I'm 7 months pregnant. I get hired by CPS. Now, my experience with parenting was what happened in my home. So I never read any parenting books. Of course, I did go to college and and learn some things about adolescent development. But even in college, we didn't talk about child abuse, right? But when I went to work for CPS, they put us through 90 days of training. Now, y'all know what CPS is, Child Protective Services, where people investigate child abuse and neglect. And so 90 days I'm in training. And I learned so much about how children can be harmed. We learned about verbal abuse. Never really thought about verbal abuse, right? We thought about emotional abuse. We learned about neglect, right? And just think about it. 90 days. That's a long time to be sitting in the classroom. And so Indy was sitting in the classroom with me because I'm all pregnant. And there were times I'd be in the classroom and I'd see her just kind of moving around. She was there. But that training in CPS, that was better, I think, than any therapy that I could have gotten on how and learning how to parent. That was so helpful. And so because of everything that I learned about all the ways in which children can be harmed and the long lasting emotional fallout of the harm that parents can do to children, I was determined that that was not going to happen to my daughter. And there was one thing that stood out to me, and it had to do with shame. And I don't know why shame was such a key thing for me to not to want to replicate. But I was determined that there were two things I never wanted to happen, which most people don't never want their children to be abused in any way. I didn't want my daughter to be abused, and I did not want to ever shame her. Never, not even once. Never wanted to do that. And so I realized that if I don't ever want to shame her, then that means that I have to be intentional about creating an environment for her where she feels free to be herself, her authentic self, no matter what, right? That even my facial expressions, because remember, I'm an empath, so I understand about how we can look at our kids in a certain way and cut them to shreds, right? And so I was determined that I would never do that. I have to turn this back on so that I can see the comments. Give me a second. Yeah, so I was determined that I would never shame her, and I knew that I had to be intentional about our interactions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, India.
Yes.
What are you thinking? What do you think about?
Okay, I'm need you to
be more specific.
Specific.
Okay.
You can't just ask me what I'm
thinking. So have you thought about so I gave this definition of Brene Brown's definition of shame. When you think of the word shame, what is it? What comes to your mind?
I think of like someone trying to hide, something that they're maybe embarrassed about, or just a part of themselves that they don't want anybody to know about, or I don't know. I just think of somebody trying to hide and I don't know. That's what I think. That's what I think of when I think of shame. I just think of like hiding and just like.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it is. It's hiding parts of yourself because you don't feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't feel safe. You don't feel that you would be protected if they knew that this part of you, whatever that part is. right? And so when I was raising India, um, and so I'm gonna talk about something very, kind of personal. So, children sometimes they have accidents, right? Mm-hmm. They have accidents in the middle of the night. They have accidents. Number one and number two.
Kids crap themselves. It's fine.
Yeah.
We've all done it. I'm not embarrassed.
Okay.
I couldn't help that.
Okay. And so, sometimes when that happens, parents, particularly when they come and wake you up in the middle of the night and, let you know that that is what happened. And so parents can can get upset about that, right? I knew that that was such a pivotal time in her life that I could not ever shame her. Well, I never wanted to shame her, but those were some particular times that I was very careful about what I said to her. And so I remember one time I was sleeping and Indy came. She had to be about 18 months or 2 years old, maybe something like that. And it was the middle of the night. And she came in my room, waking me up, Mama, Mama, I make a mess. I make a mess. And of course, I had to get up and go to work the next day. And I said, okay. So I get up and I go in her room. Yes, she did make a mess. It was all over her. She had a bowel movement all over her. And I remember, and it was always important to me to stay calm, right? To stay calm. Watch my tone of voice, my inflections, and to because children can be shamed with the tone of a voice, right? And so I was very careful. I said it's okay, baby. Everybody makes a mess sometimes. Let's clean it up. And so that's how I would handle those kinds of things, right? I would be very mindful of the tone of my voice when I was talking to her, because what I had done was learn my daughter, right? It was important to me to pay attention to know who she was and deal with her based on who she is, not who I think she ought to be, right? And I think that's a problem that's a challenge for some parents, right? Because we live like vicariously through our kids, or we have these expectations of how they should be, right? We don't want them to embarrass us. And so we shame them. But here's what I want parents to know, that you will never get what you want out of your child, not in the long run, by shaming them. And so I want you to share a little bit, Indy, about what your experience, you know, has been like, right? Um, I guess with me as your mom, mm-hmm. and the way that I have parented you. You've shared some things with me that kind of surprised me. Um, that maybe you remember, you may want to share, but I don't know. What's that been like?
I mean, it's been a pretty good childhood, for the most part. I guess the only time that I can ever think about me feeling any type of shame from you is there is this one time I used to go to summer camp every year. It was a church summer camp. And I had kissed this little ugly boy. It was horrible, first of all. Had to be like 13, 14. It was yeah. Yeah. If you got 13, 14-year-olds, I doubt y'all are watching this, but if you are, please don't worry about boys. Just no, they'll be here, unfortunately, forever. Don't be worried about them. But I had kissed this little boy, and kids just messy, and they had went and told I forget what his name was, but he was the coach. He had found out, so they took me and him in a little office, me and the little boy. And then, because somebody had seen us and told. So we was sitting in the office because we was in trouble. And then the little boy was in there talking about man, I ain't even do nothing. I don't even know her. And I'm just looking at him like. And of course, I'm not a liar. So I'm just like, yeah, man. it happened. And so, my mom, she picked me up from summer camp. They told her what happened, and I just remember you being quite upset with me, and you I don't remember what you said, but you were just, I could tell you were disappointed that I had kissed a boy. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, so but other than that, that was the only time that I've ever felt that you made me feel any type of, shame of anything. But there have been no other like significant times where you have just made me feel ashamed of myself or embarrassed to tell you something. Now, if I don't tell you something, it's not because of any shame that you have caused. Mm-hmm. It's just because of whatever's going on in my own head.
Sure.
But I'm usually very forthcoming with you, and I probably tell you a little bit too much. I probably should keep some stuff to myself. But no, I think we have had a very healthy relationship. It's funny, when I was at work today, I was talking to some of my coworkers. We were just talking about like our relationships with our parents, and I was like, yeah, like my mom's like my best friend. I could talk to her about anything. So it's been great, to have the kind of relationship with you that I had, because as I was telling some of my coworkers earlier, the older that I've gotten, the more I realize like a lot of people don't like their mamas. Yeah. A lot of people don't have good relationships with their moms. Like our what we have is quite rare, mm-hmm. and it's sad, because I wish everybody could have that, mm-hmm. with both of their parents. Certainly. But I'm also grateful that I have it, mm-hmm. Because I don't know what kind of person I'd be, or what emotional I'd be in shambles. Yeah. If you hadn't have dealt with your own trauma, because a lot of times parents will unknowingly project, yeah, what they went through growing up, yeah, onto their kids, or they'll be like, well, my mama beat me and then I turned out fine. It's like, but did you?
But did you really?
But did you though?
Yeah. Because my mama beat me, and I cannot say that I turned out. No, it impacted me.
Of course it
impacted me.
Of course
because
it did.
I had, and I think I still have like this startle response, mm-hmm. right? Because my mother would come home in the middle of the night, because she was a nurse, and so she would get home at like midnight. And when she would get home, if my stepfather told her, like, I would have a tendency to burn the tips of the spaghetti, because nobody told me to break them in half and put them in the pot, right? So I would boil spaghetti and turn the fire up too high, and the ends of it would stick out, so it would burn, yeah, right? The tips of it. And so he would tell my mother, Lynn is my middle name, Lynn burnt spaghetti. I would get awakened to the belt on my ass, right? That's how I got awakened. And so, not knowing if tonight I can sleep through the whole night, right? Now, so it impacted me, yeah, right? And I didn't want that, and I knew that I had to be intentional about it, and which means not only did I have the CPS training, but before I had India, I went to therapy. I spent years in therapy, and I was serious, because I remember I was working for the parole department, and I remember that I would, on my lunch breaks, and again, this is before I got pregnant, before I even had a child, but I was so serious about trying to heal, mm-hmm. and trying to deal with the ways in which trauma was impacting my life. And on my lunch breaks, I would drive to Richardson, to my therapist's office during lunch, get therapy, then come back to work.
You must not have had to clock in and out.
No, I didn't have to clock in and out. No, no. But I did that, and then there were times when I would I had a group therapy at night, and so I would leave work, go to group therapy, then come home. But that helped me. So between the CPS training that gave me so much insight, dealing with my own, and again, dealing with your own trauma, that's not a one and done thing either. That's right? A lifelong. That's layers, because when you look at all the adverse childhood experiences that I had, right? So I had physical abuse, sexual abuse, substance abuse in the home. My bio father abandoned me, right? Um, I had a sibling that was incarcerated, right? So all of these are, that's like, when I added it up, I had like 9 ACEs, 9 adverse childhood experiences. There's like this scale, right? And I had like 9 of them. And so it's amazing that we have the relationship that we do, but it's I think part of it is God's grace and the fact that I did something about it, that I tried to help myself. I tried to heal the wounded parts of me. And again, it is not a one and done. It is a lifelong process, right? Um, because it did impact what happened to me as a child, impacted my choice of relationship partners, right? To people that were emotionally unavailable, right? Or had their own stuff that they had to deal with, right? And so I hadn't been able to like perfect the relationship, the intimate relationship piece, but I was determined to try to get the parenting piece as well as I could, you know. And I love our relationship. We have a healthy home. And you want to share anything about like when we get upset with each other? What's that like? What's it like? Because that happened. No, you go first. You go first. No, you go first. Okay. So I'll go. So yeah, so that happens. So there are times that things happen, and I'll get upset with her, or she'll get upset with me. But because we value our relationship so much, like, okay, I'll say this. So when I was growing up, my stepfather, if he would get mad at me, he would not speak to me for like weeks. Like, we're living in the same house, see each other, and he wouldn't talk to me. So, that made me feel like non-personed. And so we don't function that way. No. We deal with stuff. That would drive me up a wall. Me too. Me too. We don't do that. If we go to bed upset with each other, which rarely happens. I can probably count on one hand. Yeah, which rarely at least by 10 o'clock that next morning, we have talked about it. Because we value the quality of our relationship so much, and we know that in order for that to continue, that we have to communicate to each other how we feel and how the other one has hurt us or offended us, or we felt, I can't say disrespected. No, disrespected. Not but that. And usually it's a misunderstanding. Just frustrated. Mm-hmm. Frustrated or upset, but never disrespected. Never that. Phil said about the kissing the boy. He said, I wonder if the reaction had more to do with getting sent home rather than actually kissing of the boy. Oh no, I didn't get sent home. It was at the end of the day. I didn't get sent home. It was just when she came to pick me up for the day. But no, they didn't send me home. It was already the end of the day, anyways, and time for the parents to come get their kids from camp. So I think maybe she might have been projecting. Maybe she hadn't, And that's what, and you get me on that quite a bit, because sometimes when I do get upset with her, I'm projecting. It's things that I did or that happened to me when I was a kid that I'm taking what she did somewhere that it doesn't need to go.
Yeah, they ain't really got nothing
And
to do
see,
with me.
I remember kissing boys when I was that young, but I also was acting out because of my own sexual abuse, right? And feeling unloved. And so that was probably exactly what that was, a projection. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think it's important not to shame your especially your daughters for wanting to kiss boys or girls if that's what they, you know, um identify with. I think it's important not to, because these are normal feelings. These are normal, especially at that age. You know, I think it's good to have like those healthy conversations with your kids so that they aren't making uninformed decisions about, you know, what to do with their body and who to allow in their personal space like that. I think it's important to not make your children feel ashamed for their sexuality, especially because that's a big thing that happens to most children. You know, if at an early age we're taught to view, especially young girls, you know, those who I identify as girls and as women from a young age, we're taught to look at sex and our sexuality in a certain way that is oftentimes very unhealthy and like repressing.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to not even cultivate that kind of environment, because then when you get grown, it's very hard to unlearn that mindset.
That's right.
You know, and you can have a lot of unhealthy negative experiences with partners. So
exactly. Yeah. And that scripture in Proverbs, that goes both ways, right? Train up a child the way they should go, and when they're old they won't depart from it. It's the If you train them up in a negative way, if you train them up and you shame them, or you make them feel bad about their identity or whatever, that sticks with them.
Sometimes forever. Sometimes people don't unlearn that stuff.
Exactly. And it impacts the way they relate in the world, and not just in intimate relationships, but in relationships on their jobs, in their relationship with coworkers, in their relationships with friends, you know, in so many ways. And so one of the things that I knew was that I had to be intentional. Like, it wasn't something that, you know, you could just decide, okay, today I'm going to do this, and today, no, 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 no. It has got to be a lifestyle, a do no harm lifestyle with your children. Do no harm, do no shaming. It's got to be something that you think about, right? And that you understand the ways in which children can be shamed, right? But I think it begins with us dealing with us as parents first, right? Absolutely. Dealing with the places in our own lives where we feel shame, where we were shamed. And saying it. One of the things about shame, and Brene Brown says this, is when we speak it, it loses its power, right? The thing that we feel shame about, right? Or the things that we feel shame about, when we begin working on them and I can identify what they are, say it, share it with somebody. This is what, and I felt shame around that. Speak that thing, then it loses its power. And so we must be intentional about not doing that, because shame, it is repressive, right? It is repressive, and it keeps people from self-actualizing. It keeps people from fulfilling their dreams. And if you are listening to this, you're listening to this because you care, right? And because you don't want to raise shame-filled children, or because you grew up with shame and you want to heal from your own shame. Well, then that means that it's not too late, and that you can develop a plan, a strategy things that you can do, things that you can learn and unlearn. So that you do not repeat that cycle. And listen, nobody is perfect, right? And so that means that when you as a parent make a mistake, when you drop the ball, it's really all right to say, you know what, I'm sorry. I apologize, baby. Mama was wrong on that one.
It's so funny that you say that, because that's something else that I wanted to touch on is not reprimanding or punishing your children for, like, saying no. I'm not talking about saying I'm not talking about being disrespectful, but just for not wanting to do something, or for saying no, or for expressing to you that something that you did was hurtful to them.
Yeah.
That's really the main point that I really am trying to get at is, so I feel like most parents, especially, I don't even want to say from a certain generation, because even my generation, some of with kids are guilty of this, but I think a lot of times parents have this mindset that, well, I'm the parent, and what I say goes, and it's like they take their children standing up for themselves, or vocalizing their grievances with something that you did as disrespect. It's like, hey mom, when you did this, or hey dad, when you did this, this is how it made me feel, or this is how I feel when you do this, when you say this. It's then it's taken as disrespect.
Oh, man.
That is a surefire way to, one, not only make your child feel shame, but especially because usually this starts at a very, very young age. Basically from the time that they're able to talk, is when this kind of shaming starts.
Mm-hmm.
You create this, like, mindset that it's not okay to speak up for yourself.
Yeah.
And that, if that you should just take abuse.
Whatever somebody dishes out.
Because especially if you are a person who's in a position where the perpetrator of said abuse is maybe caring for you financially or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, well, he's paying for things, so
I guess I
just or at least he's not beating me.
Yeah.
Which
I think that's a real good point, Indy, that and do you see your child as a human being?
Most people would say yes.
Yeah.
Because they would like to think that they do.
Yeah.
But no.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
And I always, and I know I did this. I always saw you as a human being, right? As a person.
Yeah.
Not my person, but a human being. A human being that God put on this planet, put in this realm, right? And that means that you have emotions. That means you have a perspective. That means you have feelings, and that need to be respected and heard and listened to. And so I always treated you that way, right? Even to the point of, and I know I'm going to get some heat from some parents.
Oh, well.
I don't just bust up in your room.
They could take some notes.
I don't just bust up in your room. Number one of the things that I told Indy early on is that I've got to be able to trust you, right? But it was up to me to create an environment where you felt that you could trust me.
Yeah. And I felt like I didn't feel like I had to sneak around.
And you didn't feel like you had to hide,
yeah,
right?
And never felt like
so
that.
It's one thing, for parents to say, I need to trust you, but parent, are you creating an environment where your child can feel safe being completely open and honest with you, right? That's how trust is built. How do you respond to things that your child tells you or that your child does? Because our reactions can show our children, I'm not gonna be able to tell her that because she can't handle that truth, right? So I knew that I created an environment of trust, right? And so I never was afraid that something was going on behind the door, you know, because I knew what I had created. Mm-hmm. I knew what I had cultivated in you and in our relationship, right? Um, and so, yeah, so I respected you. I respected your privacy, right? I respect my daughter.
Yeah. And everyone is entitled to privacy, even children. And yeah. I think most people don't. Unfortunately, most parents don't agree with that, which I think is quite sad.
Yeah.
And that's a surefire way to create an unhealthy relationship with your child.
Yeah. So. Stephanie Kirby McNary says, Ari in India, thank God for your discussion on this subject and your transparency. Thanks for sharing your insights and experiences. Is this my friend Stephanie Kirby?
You know any other Stephanie Kirby's?
Well, the McNary part, I don't know who that is. But anyway, hey, how you doing? Yeah, and so the trust was important. I put a lot of the responsibility on the parent. I do, and so it is about what you create, what you cultivate, right? Someone says, I do believe we all see our children as human by nature. Everything is we learn as we go. I hear you, but I don't think every parent sees their child as human beings in the sense of with rights, yeah, right, and with their own emotions and with a perspective, right. I think a lot of parents see their children as theirs, mm-hmm, right, as theirs, almost and property. Because we grew up. I brought you in, I take you out. Right? So that means you're mine. Mm-hmm. And I can do with you what I want to do with you. Right? So I think a lot of parents have that mindset with their children. And instead of God gave me to you and you to me, God gave us to each other. Here's my responsibility. My responsibility is to get to know who you are, this gift that God gave me. My responsibility is get to know who you are and help you to become the person who you were meant to be. Who you were meant to be. Not who I want you to be, right? Not some offshoot of the me that I couldn't be or didn't be because I didn't make choices, right? That would help me to be the woman I really wanted to be, or because whatever reason, right? But children are separate human beings from their parents, and I don't think we a lot of parents see it that way. Yeah. We have this sense of ownership. But no, we don't own human beings. That's called slavery. Yeah, we don't own that. That's we don't own them. Period. Yeah, and of course, how we have been impacted by the enslavement of our peoples. That's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Right, because I think that's a lot of where the beatings come in.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
But again, we have to deal with our own trauma, whether it's the trauma from our own abuse or whether it's the trauma from post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Those are things that we as parents, and particularly now we're talking about Black parents, that we need to deal with, right? And so that's kind of how we're able to cultivate this shame-free home. It was intentional, and it's strategic. Oh, here's the other thing. I think in Indy's entire life, maybe you got 3 or 4 spankings.
Yeah, maybe.
That listen. I told y'all I got trained in CPS. So I understood this thing about beating, the harm that it can do to, and I never did that. I never beat her. That never happened.
No.
Ever. And I remember one time your dad and I went someplace and we left you with my mom. Just we went out a date or something, I don't remember. Came back to my mom's house, and my mother was, Indy hadn't been potty trained yet. And so when I walked into my mother's den, she had the little potty, and Indy was running around with no clothes on. And my mother had like a switch. And me and your dad looked at, and we're like, what is this? And she was she was like trying to spank India in order to help her to get potty trained. I like to lost my mind. I'm like, no, that's not how we do this. That's not how we do this. However long it takes her to get potty trained, that's how long it's gonna take. We're not gonna beat her into subjection. We're not gonna beat her into learning how to go to the potty. We're not gonna do that. And so I saw, and this is what I knew for myself. I knew that if I beat my daughter, that was saying more about me than it was about her. Because what it was saying about me was that I lost control. And it was saying about me that I couldn't think of other creative ways to handle my daughter's disobedience or whatever it was. But it was usually something, I felt like it was something that like a flaw in me. Now, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not trying to put a guilt trip on anybody. I'm telling you how I processed it in my own mind. If I would have beat my daughter, I would have seen it like a personal failure on my part, that I couldn't figure out how to get a point across to her without picking up something and beating her with it, right? And so I'm always trying to figure out, okay, why'd she do this? What do I need to do? How do I need to shift this?
I think it comes down to effective communication. You say you're not gonna shame any guilt trip anybody, but I will. I will, absolutely. I think that if she doesn't speak for me, I'm my own person. So this is her opinion. This is mine. I will absolutely shame people who feel like they have to beat their children into behaving correctly, because I promise you, a child. I know so many of my friends who would be like, oh, she just gonna beat me and then I'm gonna do it again tomorrow. So it's like your communication skills are so poor that the only thing you know how to do is resort to violence. I think that says a lot about, like you said, you as a parent. If that's what you feel like, if that's the only way that you feel like you can communicate with your child, especially if they're a young child, I just feel like there's so many other ways to, especially if your kid does something that is wrong. I think there's so many other ways to communicate with them why the choices that they may have made were not the best. I'll give you an example. I had to be, I think, in the first or second grade. My mom had picked me up from school, and we stopped by the gas station. I think you know what story.
I know where this is going.
Okay, so just a little bit of backstory. Prior to that, as a child, like kindergarten, first grade, I was a bit of a kleptomaniac, right? I was real slippery with the hands. I would just take things. I would steal. For those who don't know what kleptomania is, I'm sure you do. You guys are really smart people. I was, real. I like real handsy. I like to just take things. I see it, I like it, I'm gonna take it, right? So one day she had. I used to steal like these little stuffed animals the little kids used to have. They used to be called Furbies. You'd get them at McDonald's. And I remember one time I was at an after school program, and all the kids' backpacks was lined up in the hallway. Had to be like 10 backpacks. I stole all of them, right? Stole all of them. Didn't get caught. So one day, I think I had to be in the first grade. Mom picked me up from school, stopped by the gas station, went in the gas station. I had stole a pack of gum. Now, a smart person would have been like, okay, I'm going to put this in my pocket, right? So it don't fall out. That wasn't me. I wasn't a smart thief. I wasn't a smart thief. So I had on my little, school jacket. I take the gum, I put it right here, and I just do this. Right, it doesn't make sense. So then we're walking out, and then we're outside. The pack of gum just falls on the ground. My mom looks at the gum. She looks at me. She shakes her head like, let's go pick up that gum. Let's go back inside. Right? So we pick up and I'm just over here embarrassed because I just done got caught stealing by my mom. She didn't even know I stole until now. So we go back in the store, and she makes me apologize to the cashier at the gas station and give the gum back. And the cashier just behind just laughing at me because she thinks it's funny. She thinks it's funny. And I'm over here embarrassed, like thinking I'm going to go home and get, beat, even though I had never gotten beat before. I didn't know what was going to happen. And, we get home. I go in my room, get ready for bed. My mom comes in my room. I was sitting on top of my little bunk bed. I don't remember what she said to me. It was nothing crazy. She didn't never put her hands on me, didn't get violent. She just in the most calm way possible. Now I know I raised you better than that. We stealing now?
So we stealing
So
now?
we stealing. Is this the kind of person you want to be? And then she just left my room. The conversation was something like that, and so then she turns off the light, and I'm just laying in my bed like, I'm never doing that again. Never stole again. Now, that is something that you do need to be ashamed for. If you stealing, you should be ashamed, right? But the way that she communicated with me, it wasn't in a way that, like, I don't know how to explain it. It was effective. That's all I'm gonna say, because I didn't do it again, right? She didn't need to get violent. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to be condescending. She didn't need to insult my personhood, call me stupid, dumb, none of that. In fact, she was reminding me that you are better than this, right? So you just have to figure out what effective communication style works for your child. And I just feel like more oftentimes than not, it's not violence. So I just wanted to do that little story time.
Well, I'm glad you did that story time. And our time really is up. But okay. I want to say thank you, India, for sharing that story. And I always wanted to. I never wanted to non-person you, right? Never make you feel less than. Period. Never wanted to make you feel less than. And so always want to honor your dignity. Even when you stealing stuff out the store, you're still a human being.
Even when I am doing things I should be ashamed of.
You're still a person. Yes. You're still a human being, right? And so I always wanted to treat you that way. And so, listen, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate that. Thank you for this conversation. And give me some sugar. I love you. And so, parents,
don't shame your kids.
Don't shame your kids.
Don't beat your kids.
And take care of yourself. Take care of your own heart. Okay, take care of your own heart. All right, love you. And while you're at it, dream big.
Oh. Okay. You forgot, but I was going to make an announcement. So, for those of you who have known my mom for years, you would know how much she talks about me, and things that I love to do, music being one of them. So I mean, I've written songs and recorded songs before, but I will be releasing, if all goes well, I will be releasing my first. I consider it my first like official single on all streaming platforms. The song is called Superstar. It's a very, very special song. Um, I feel like it's one of the best songs that I've written or released, and so I will be doing a lot of like promotion leading up to that song, just to kind of create some hype and some traction. So um, and my mom will be as well, because she's always been super supportive of me. But I just wanted to go ahead and make that announcement that I will be releasing my first single, and it will be on all streaming platforms: iTunes, Spotify, everything, Shazam, TikTok. Hopefully Instagram will have it on there where you can play it as well. So yeah, I wanted to announce that because that's something very near and dear to me, and it's music has always been, I'd say, my first passion. So yeah, but that's it.
All right, thank you. And if you would like to show us some appreciation for this great conversation, I've just put our cash apps, mine and India's, in the on the little thingy there
In the
in
description
the
box.
description box. All right, thank you again. We sure appreciate you, and we may be back for some other real talks, mother daughter real talks. Who knows? All right, thank you. Bye bye.